On the night of March 30th, 1955, a 32-year-old woman sat in the Pantages Theater in Hollywood, waiting to hear whether she had just become the first black woman ever to win the Academy Award for Best Actress. Photographers had followed her all week. Her face had been on the cover of Life magazine. 10 years later, she would be found dead in a small rented apartment a few miles from that theater, with a little over $2 left in her bank account. The reason why is quieter and sadder than most people know. If you were watching movies in the 1950s, you knew Dorothy Dandridge. She was the woman in the red skirt in Carmen Jones, moving across the screen with a confidence that made the whole picture revolve around her. She was the face on the magazine covers and the headliner whose nightclub act sold out the biggest rooms in the country. She sang at the Waldorf in New York and the Macambo on the Sunset Strip. For a few years in the middle of that decade, she was, by any honest measure, one of the most famous and most beautiful women in America. And she had earned every inch of it the slow way. She was born in Cleveland in 1922, and she was working almost before she can have understood what work was. Her mother, Ruby, was an entertainer, and by the time Dorothy was 5, she and her older sister Vivian were touring as a children's act, performing at churches and schools across the South. Later, they became the Dandridge sisters and played the Cotton Club in Harlem while still teenagers. There was no discovery story, no lucky break in a drugstore. There was a childhood spent in the back of cars, in rented rooms, singing for whoever would pay. By the time Hollywood noticed her, she had been a professional for nearly 20 years. Then came Carmen Jones in 1954, and the ceiling she broke through was a real one. No black actress had ever been nominated for Best Actress before. She did not win that night in 1955. The award went to Grace Kelly, but the nomination itself was supposed to be the door opening. Every account of that moment describes a woman who believed the hard part was finally over. What happened instead is the part the tribute reels skip. The parts did not come. She had reached the very top of her profession and found that the industry simply had no leading roles written for a black leading lady. Years passed between pictures. She turned down work she considered demeaning, which was much of what she was offered, and the alternative was often no work at all. She went back to the nightclubs, where the money was, and the clubs came with their own arithmetic. There were hotels where she was the headline attraction on the marquee out front, but could not stay in a room, could not eat in the dining room, could not use the pool the guests used. She was the biggest name in the building, and a guest nowhere in it. She kept performing anyway, and she almost never made a public speech about any of it. She carried something else, too, privately, for 20 years. Her daughter Harolyn, born in 1943, had suffered severe brain damage and would need care for her entire life. Dandridge kept her at home as long as she possibly could, then paid for private care, and that care cost money in a way nothing else in her life did. Much of what she earned in those glittering nightclub years went straight into keeping her daughter looked after. When the money eventually stopped, that was the obligation that had no way of stopping with it. If you remember watching her, take a moment to subscribe. We tell one Golden Age star's real story every week. The collapse, when it came, was not dramatic. It was paperwork. In the early 1960s, she put a large share of her savings into an oil investment in Arizona that turned out to be worthless. The figure most often cited is around $150,000, an enormous sum then, and it was simply gone. Her second marriage had ended, and it had not helped her finances. In 1963, she filed for bankruptcy, listing debts of well over $100,000, including taxes she had no way to pay. She lost the house in the hills. She had to move her daughter into state care, which by every account was the single hardest thing she ever did. And she moved herself into a modest apartment on Fountain Avenue in West Hollywood, a short drive and an entire lifetime from the Pantages. She did not give up. That is the detail most people get wrong about her last years. She was booking club dates again. She had a comeback picture being discussed. She was working. Friends who saw her in that period described a woman who was tired and thinner than she had been, but still very much planning her return. On September 8, 1965, she was found in that apartment. She was 42 years old. The coroner's finding was an overdose of an antidepressant she had been prescribed, ruled accidental. Her estate was reported to hold about $2.14. $2.14 for the first black woman ever nominated for Best Actress, 10 years after her face was on the cover of Life. And here is the part worth sitting with. The reason was not extravagance, and it was not that America stopped loving her. Audiences never stopped. The reason was that she had climbed to a place where there was nothing built for her to stand on. The nomination was real, and the applause was real, and the roles behind them did not exist. So the one asset she had, that face, that voice, that presence, could only be sold in rooms that took a piece of her dignity as part of the fee. She paid for her daughter with it for as long as she could, and when a bad investment took the rest, there was no second career to fall back on, because she had never been allowed to build one. In the decades since, the industry has been considerably more generous to her memory than it ever was to her career. Halle Berry, accepting the Best Actress award in 2002 that Dandridge had been nominated for 47 years earlier, named her from the stage. There is a star on Hollywood Boulevard now. There have been books and a film about her life. It all arrived a long time after the woman on Fountain Avenue could use any of it. She was not a cautionary tale, and she was not a tragedy waiting to happen. She was a working professional from the age of 5 who did everything right, broke a barrier nobody had broken, and discovered that the door she opened led into a room with no chairs. That is the quiet reason why. Next time, the actor his own drama school voted least likely to succeed, and the 50 years that proved every one of them wrong.